Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric series, The Port Authority, where I weigh some of my favorite arcade games of all time directly against their home console counterparts. And if you can't tell already today, we're playing Virtua Fighter 3 both on the Sega Model 3 as well as the Dreamcast. And this video is in direct response to the Sega Rally 2 comparison I did a few months ago, where we talked about how vastly inferior that port was to Dreamcast. And a lot of people were commenting and saying the same thing about Virtua Fighter 3, and while that isn't the case, there are some differences, and we're going to go over them today and say which version is the better one to play. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely does help us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But we're starting off with the Sega Model 3 footage, and I will tell you when we change sources, because I find logos in the corner to be visually distracting to me personally. The thing is about the Model 3, it has a higher internal rendering resolution compared to the Dreamcast, but on Supermodel as well as Flycast, I've enhanced these both to get them to the exact same resolution, so we can kind of bypass that at least. And the thing about these games is there's a lot of changes between them that are completely stylistic. As we go over to the Dreamcast footage, you're going to see a different lighting model here. Sometimes stages are going to have a different color background for no reason other than the developers felt like changing them. Now this home port was not made by Sega, it was made by Genki, so it is a port from a third-party developer. But the good thing is they are very similar. As we go side by side, Model 3 on the left and Dreamcast on the right, you can see that the ground is a little bit more evenly lit, but I would say as far as the shadow quality is concerned, looks slightly better to me on the Dreamcast version of the game. Some of the models can have higher polygons in instances, but really there's not too many differences here, at least off the top. Let's move over to Model 3 again. There's two different versions, just so you know. They both have identical graphics. One is Virtua Fighter 3 and one is Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle, which basically mirrored the Dreamcast release as a second ROM revision. And I will say right now, this is probably my favorite stage to look at visually and least favorite to play, because the stairs really do change up the entire fighting game mechanic and get it a little bit confusing. But look at the carpet, look at the red, look at the bookcases. And as we move over to the Dreamcast version of the game, you're actually going to see a little bit of what looks like fog in the background that doesn't appear on the Model 3. You can decide which one looks better to you. It is subjective, but I would say in some instances I actually like the appearance of the Dreamcast version of the game more. Now do be aware as well, they run at different resolutions. They also run at different frame rates. The Sega Model 3 has a different refresh rate than the Dreamcast does as far as hardware is concerned, so there's going to be some slight deviances in there as well. When we come back over to the Model 3 footage, you're going to see more shadow in the background there, but the fog has diminished. It is just a stylistic look. It is subjective. There really isn't anything to point to and say one is better than the other, but that's always what it comes down to with vibe. You kind of decide what looks better to you, and you kind of go ahead and run with it. But I will say, if you've heard that the Dreamcast port of Virtua Fighter 3 is a bad port, that is absolutely not true whatsoever. It's still an incredible game, and it's still a very competent home version of the arcade original. I don't know where the rumor got started that it was bad. It's nowhere near the Sega Rally 2 situation where I would say, unless you absolutely want to play Dreamcast, go to Model 3 and don't look back. Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle across both of these sources is incredibly close. But let's go to the locked off introductory cut sequence just to see the models side by side, and you will see, at least in the beginning, we're going to have a frame sync where all of the different hard cuts adhere to each other. We have Model 3 on the left and we have Dreamcast on the right, but they will get out of sync once some loading goes in and the models come up, but that's totally normal. These two sources would never sync even if you were running them directly side by side off real hardware in both instances. But I would say here you really see a difference in the overall colors between the Model 3 and the Dreamcast. That skybox in the background has weirdly shifted, and you can decide whether or not you like it. It's just a change. Clearly Genki was kind of playing around with things in the background. As far as the introductory cut sequence is concerned though, I would absolutely say the skybox with that pink and a little bit of blue in the clouds is just a prettier look, where on the Dreamcast side of things, looks like there might be a little pollution in the background. But watch as Shun here drinks his alcohol on the Model 3. His head gets a little bit redder, kind of like that glow you get when you've had too many drinks, and that's something that doesn't happen on the Dreamcast side that I've ever seen. It is a very small detail, but it is an observable one. But as far as the animations are concerned, the models are concerned, their overall look, it really does feel almost like par here. We're talking 99.9% the exact same image and the exact same quality, with some stylistic changes in the artwork. But now it's time for the soundtrack sample. First we're going to do the Sega Model 3, and then we're going to move over to Dreamcast. So listen to the audio quality and hear if you can tell any differences between the two, because again, they are incredibly close.
Fight! 1, ready, go! Oh yeah! KO! 1, ready, go! Fight 2!
I mean, honestly, I'm just going to call that a straight up tie. They do have a slightly different sound, but otherwise both sound incredible, and you can decide for yourself which one you like better. But what really is the delineating difference in this one stage here is the overall color profile that they're using for the Sumo Ring against Takarashi here. I just don't like how it looks as good on Dreamcast as I do on Sega Model 3. So we'll side by side them again, Model 3 on the left, Dreamcast on the right, and it definitely is a less vibrant image. That's just something that you're going to deal with when you play the Dreamcast version of the game. I would say maybe the vibrancy and the sun is a little too hot on the left, and it's definitely a little bit too underexposed on the right. So I would say that neither one of these images is perfect to me, but again, we're into pure subjectivity territory. Now let's just kind of take a look at the overall motion of the characters in fights, not trying to compare direct scenes side by side. Here on Model 3, Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle just looks incredible, these waves washing up onto the sand. The Sega Model 3 was such a powerful piece of hardware, you could get absolutely incredible performance out of it. But in some ways the Dreamcast was more powerful than the Sega Model 3 as well. It was definitely a home console, and it was made to be affordable, so you didn't have to sell it for multiple thousands of dollars like you did Model 3. But technology was moving fast enough in the late 90s where something like Dreamcast could eclipse Model 3 in certain departments for a $300 price tag at home versus that multiple thousands of dollars or stuff like this here. The physics in the water on the Dreamcast side of things looks absolutely stunning. Sure, you don't get much in the way of a background because all of the computational power here is being used to render the waves and all of the motion of these boards and ship in the background, but it is something that when you saw this on Dreamcast, you were absolutely blown away back in the day, and still today it looks very nice. And that really is the reality of this. I will say right now, the idea that the Dreamcast port of Virtua Fighter 3 is a bad port and you shouldn't play it should absolutely be dispelled. You have more than one way to play a game now in 2024, 2025, and there is definitely options out there. If you were emulating, you could totally go for Model 3 and get that look. You could use Flycast and do enhancements and get that look as well. If you're playing on real hardware and you want to know which one is better, I am going to say that the Dreamcast version is the version you should play unless you are an arcade collector. There's absolutely no reason to go out and get the Model 3 arcade PCB like you're looking at here unless you're a hardcore collector and Virtua Fighter fan, because you really aren't getting much more whatsoever, but you're definitely going to be spending a lot more time and a lot more money setting it up and purchasing it. If we move back over to the Dreamcast, you can grab a disc Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle for probably $15 or $20 online and get an extremely competent port of this game home. And again, I'm just not quite sure how the rumor got started. The Virtua Fighter 3 on Dreamcast is a bad port. It is not a perfect port, but it's 98% of the way there. And I love that this game will sometimes just absolutely screw itself up. You'll see here we knocked her off the roof, and then Lau is going to follow directly afterwards in his celebration. I love that that can happen in this stage. It's always made me laugh since I first saw it back in the day, and it'll never end up being boring to me. But sometimes when you compare ports, you have to actually just look at them side by side and think to yourself, how much more is the arcade version of this game bringing to me than the home console port is? And as far as the answer on something like Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle, if I didn't tell you what footage you were watching right now, you probably wouldn't be able to guess too much whatsoever. So you tell me right now, is this on the Dreamcast or is this on the Model 3? I'm not telling you, you just get to vote down below as to which one you think it is. And when I'm not quite sure if anyone's going to be able to get the right answer, that means the ports are incredibly close. So to answer this question, which version should you play? You really need to answer the question is, how do you want to play the game? If you want to emulate Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle, you should definitely go to the Supermodel side of things, even though the Dreamcast port is exceptional. Some of the stylistic changes Genki made in the Dreamcast home port I just don't like as much. If you want to go with the real hardware route and play this on a television, absolutely 10 out of 10 times and twice on Sunday, pick the Dreamcast Dreamcast version of the game. It is an absolutely outstanding port that's every bit as fun as the Model 3 original and a hell of a lot easier to set up. But we're done. Leave me your comments down below and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.